Danke, guten Tag. Mein Name ist Fred Deichler und ich komme aus Amerika. Ich lerne Deutsch bei Duolingo ähm, über 1637 Tagen. Ich bin ein bisschen nervös, äh, weil mein Deutsch nicht perfekt ist. Aber los geht's. Eigentlich,
Sounds great.
eigentlich, I'm actually going to do this in English because that's the extent I'm very nervous to speak in German in front of people who know German. So thank you for listening to me.
Perfect.
Yeah. So once again, yeah, my name is Fred Deichler, and my talk is improve your flow of value with automations. And I got my clicker. And this is really what it is. It's a story about how retrospective action items can improve your continuous flow. Like I said, my name is Fred Deichler. I'm a senior agile coach in Grants Pass, Oregon, which means it is 8:47 a.m. for me. I had to double check the time difference quite a few times to make sure I was going to be on time this evening. Um, I like to say that I enable effective and efficient teams by leveraging processes and tools to aid individuals' interactions. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you see me at a conference like this or one of the other ones that I'm speaking at. Our talk today is mainly going to circle around Jira and Slack, because these are the tools that I use on a daily basis. But automations don't have to be limited to just Jira and Slack. In fact, I've used it successfully with Google Sheets and with Microsoft Teams. So, quick question for the audience. Feel free to shout it out if you're in the room or online. You can unmute and say something or go in the chat. But I want to know, like, has anyone here experimented at all with automations in Jira?
No.
I heard one no and a bunch of silence. I'm going to imagine it's all no. So this is all be beautiful, brand new information to you, which is great.
In the chat, seems like somebody said yes.
Oh, Manuel, thank you. It's actually automations. They're actually called automations in Jira. It's on the left side of the screen usually. But what it does, it's about a way to automate tasks. And Manuel, maybe if I say something wrong, feel free to jump in and correct me.
Fred, I'm not a really specialist in automation in Jira. I had just a few experiments doing it, for example, to pushing information to Slack channels if something turns in another state and stuff like that. And we had in that contracting I'm in at the moment, we have a big automation into creating epics and stories according to a certain setting in a project, and then the stuff is created automatically, so you do not have to manually create the items in Jira. So they have some more experience than me myself, but yeah, that's the first time I saw it anyway. So
well, thank you for sharing your story. That's great. Yeah, you can use it for a lot of different things. I'm just going to show you a couple of use cases today, how I use it to actually improve our flow in our system. So if we go back a while, many of us might have worked in rooms such like this. We had our stand up in the morning. We could discuss any impediments we had. And if we're, a good Scrum team, we'll inspect our progress towards a sprint goal. But this is kind of how we work now, where this is my workstation. Took a picture of it earlier this year. And really, the only way you don't know you're on a video call is if you just see that red light on your camera versus the green light. But one of the great things here is I get to look out at some beautiful forest out behind me. You can't see it through this window here, but I love being a remote employee. In fact, the world of work has changed. According to Code Summit, 16% of companies worldwide are fully remote. And over the past 5 years, the number of remote workers has increased by 44%. And just this year, Forbes reported that 98% of workers have a desire to work remotely at least part of the time. So remote work is here to stay, and it's not going away. So question, once again, for y'all is, how many y'all are fully remote like me? Raise your hand or say something in the chat.
No.
All right. What about hybrid? You sometimes work from home.
I think you might not have seen one person in the corner was remote.
Okay.
Fully remote.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I'm looking. It's pretty small on my screen, but yeah, as you can see, like hybrid, this is the way we work, and we lose out on sometimes those drive-by conversations or sitting in the same team room to say, hey, something needs your attention. So we're gonna take the story and go back through my history of automations. We're going to go back to mid 2020. As we all know what happened, that was when the world kind of shut down. We all expected at that time, when we were switching to a remote only work for a while, that there'd be a drop in efficiency from being co-located to being fully remote. But at my company, after a few months, we were delivering value much slower. It was nowhere close to pre-pandemic levels. The CTO asked me for my insight and experience at helping teams work more efficiently. And I was a former development manager, and I had a lot of ideas. But something was nagging at me to not solution it to the teams. So what did I do? I took it to the teams. That's right. It's an age-old thing in Scrum. If you got a problem, take it to the team. Don't tell them what to do. Ask them what we should do. It's one of my favorite lines I say to myself whenever I get into a solutioning mindset. And my favorite way to take it to the teams is through a retrospective. Now, I don't have a favorite retrospective format. I like to keep it fresh to enable the team to discover what they need. But whenever I do facilitate a retrospective, I make sure my teams always walk away with at least one and no more than 2 action items. Now, this is very important to me because early in my Scrum career, I was very bad at retrospectives. We never had any improvements. We never analyzed their data. We never decided upon an action item. They were just like complaint sessions. It took me a long time to get good at retros. Now, this one you can see was a mad, sad, glad retro. And one thing that became clear during the retro was that the team's sprint backlog was not in their control. They never knew what the most important work was because there was so much flux. See, tickets were showing up randomly on the sprint board, and people were also working non-transparently in tickets. So like any good Scrum Master, I asked them what action we could do to improve the process. They said, hey, if we start on something, just add it to the sprint. It's easy. You click it, add it to the current sprint. And this was one of the crucial parts of this was I was not going to do it. It was, the team had to own it. The question is, did it work? Not really. The intentions were there, but the teams had very little incentive to do it. Now, if we go back to that picture of the team room, beyond those people and interactions, look around them on the walls. We have all these whiteboards and sticky notes, giving us continual reminders of things that are important to the team. There might be product goals, sprint goals. Hey, maybe even a basic sprint backlog. Every time you walked through that room, you were inundated with background information, almost like it was radiating from the walls. And bingo, I had this aha moment. I went back to one of my certification courses thinking about it, and all these things, they were information radiators. Information radiators term has been around since about year 2000, and Alistair Coburn is often credited with coming up with it. And if you're familiar with a radiator, it radiates heat, radiates information, as opposed to the information refrigerator, like Confluence might be, where you have to go in, you have to reach in, and you have to grab that information. So information radiators are highly visible. They're positioned strategically, and they promote open communication and feedback. Like what Manuel was talking about, where alerts and channel. That's for me a description of an information radiator. So I had this in the back of my mind as I was working. And one day, while doing my normal Scrum Master duties, I noticed something in the sidebar under the project settings of Jira. This automation, and I just had this light bulb moment, like, what can I do to help the team? It was almost like that moment of wonder when Jack Skellington in Nightmare Before Christmas first saw snow. That's how I felt. What's this? Oh my gosh, what's this? So going back to that story of the team with their sprint backlog that was out of control, I said, what if we use automation and we could sense when the sprint backlog was changing and then automate to add something to the sprint? Because we wanted to practice transparency. So, we said, hey, if a code commit is detected, or if there's a change in progress, add to the sprint. And like I said, because of transparency, let's send that alert to Slack and add a comment to Jira to explain what happened. Now we're talking about Jira automation. So let's take a look at what that might look like in your platform. So the great thing about automation is automation in Jira is that it can interact with third-party tools, such as GitHub. So what we have here is like when a commit is created, so it runs these rules. Automation is a series of rules. When a commit is created, or if someone moves something in progress, what we do is say, hey, should we add that to the sprint? This is done kind of like a series of if-else statements. We said, hey, if it matches, for those of you who are familiar with JQL, we say if the sprint is not an open sprint, basically it's not in the current sprint, we're going to edit the sprint field and move it into the current sprint. And because I talked about transparency, we're going to send an alert to Slack and add a comment to the ticket. Now, one thing we did with the Slack alert is if you see this thing called initiator.displayName. Oh, one thing I forgot to say at the beginning. Don't worry about taking notes. I'm going to hand out copies, digital copies of a participant's version of this presentation. At the end, I'm just going to ask you for a little bit of information you'll be able to hand that out to you. And so that's where you can see all this stuff. But initiator.displayName is like the person who did the action. It says, hey, they added a bug, story, task, whatever it is, to the current sprint. Because we wanted that transparency so the team could know, which is especially important if we're not in that co-located space. And additionally, like I said, we're going to add a comment saying to explain what happened. Because if you don't tell people what happened, they start making up their own story. Oh, that Jira just added tickets randomly. It's like, no, there was actions that caused this. So this was my first automation. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to turn it on and just see what happens. I start seeing these messages in Slack, but people adding things to Sprint and more and more and more messages and getting overwhelmed. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? What's going on? Now, note, this is not all in one day. It was over a little bit of time. I thought, like, what have I done? What did I unleash on Slack? Is this what the new information radiation looks like? Was this about transparency going to increase our delivery of value? Well, not exactly, because in this situation, Scrum, it actually uncovered more questions than it provided answers. And time question for y'all. It's October. It's Halloween. It's horror season. So I want to. Does anyone have any Jira horror stories they want to share with the room? Or Slack?
I mean, for me, the horror story is if you just have like a ticket but no description.
Those are definitely scary. We had a time when I'll share another one. Someone went through and deleted a bunch of tickets, and it just lost forever. And then we decided we need to update the administration fund so only certain people had delete privilege. And people say, "Why can't I delete?" I'm like, because you're going to want to undelete at some point, probably. Anyone have any else? All right. So after seeing this avalanche of messages, I did what the Scrum Master should do because it wasn't solving the problem. I went back to the team. And once again, we did a retrospective. And this is a sailboat retro. I love the sailboat retro. It's so happy. Teams post their goal for the sprint and discuss the actions that propelled them towards that goal and maybe what held them back. I reminded them about their previous goal, which is very important, which is, hey, if you start on something, add it to the sprint. We went around the room, and then another theme started to emerge in the anchor section. And that was that there were inter-team dependencies and blocking tickets. So things were added to the sprint because other work couldn't get done. And so I asked the team, like, what action item should we do? They said, okay, and Jira has this feature where you can add a link to a ticket. And we're gonna say, hey, we're gonna add this blocked by thing, and we'll know if it's blocked. We shouldn't work on it. So did it work? No, because their intentions in the room of the retro were there, but there wasn't a lot of incentive to take that action or to not work on the blocked ticket. So I reflected on the situation. And I thought about my newly acquired automation skills. I thought, could automation help me? I did some research to see what was available by automation and found the well was deep, like really, really down to the bedrock deep of what you could do with automation. So I had an idea. I mapped out the results we wanted based on the inputs we had, and I created a couple automations. First one, it still triggers when it goes to a code commit or when a ticket moves into in progress. But we want to check to see if the ticket is blocked. And if it is blocked, let's radiate that information by sending a message to Slack, add a comment to Jira, and push that ticket back to open. Because even with those transparent communications, people might just continue like, oh, it's in progress. I'm going to keep on working on it, even though it's blocked. Now that solves like the first half of the equation, which if something's blocked, don't start on it. But how do you become alerted if the blocked ticket is ready? I mean, sure, you can follow it on email, but what we did is, hey, if it moves to done, what we wanted to do is check, see if it has any linked issues and comment back on those issues. Just say, hey, this ticket that was blocking previously is now done, giving you the authorization or permission to move forward. So let's see how it might look in code. Now, we already know what the triggers look like. So here's that blocking condition. Like it's code. If something, if it matches the type is blocked by, then, and that is blocked by is not closed, want to do some stuff. First, we send it back to open, move it from in progress back to open. And we send that alert to Slack. And we alert people very clearly and transparently, saying, hey, this can't be moved to in progress until the following tickets are closed. This is really radiating that information out and trying to improve that flow of value. So things we're actually starting to improve. Now, not as quickly as some people might like, because with every step of the way, we were building up more questions and we're providing answers. So it got me thinking. I was really thinking more about those radiators and information and how to improve flow of value. And what other opportunities we have to smooth things out. And the question I kept going back to is, how can we let people know things before they need to know that they need to know it? And so I had this, we have this big idea in software development, cycle time. But in reality, it's very similar to a manufacturing line. And this is how we broke down our stages of development. So what I did is I started to look at flow metrics. I wanted to look at the value add time and the non-value add time, see if there's any bottlenecks. And I found a big bottleneck. It was actually in the final stage of our development process. But it was not just that stage of demo. It was surrounding that stage before it got to demo and when it was done. These were adding artificial slowdowns to our system. So I thought about the way we work and what we could do. And I created these things I call gondoliers and shoulder tappers to move things along. Now, our gondoliers, they're those ushers for our work in the system, moving the work from point A to point B with minimal intervention by the team. They just help keep that nice flow of work. And shoulder tappers, these are little reminders to people that they have action they can or should take. So for this case, I looked at that waste, that non-value add time and cycle time. And really, it started when our quality assurance said the ticket had passed. At the time, the system we used, we had a checkbox that's QA done. But all things being human, sometimes people would check the box, but they wouldn't move it to the next stage. So I said, hey, what if when the box is checked, we move that ticket to demo? That was our gondolier moving it. And then we have our shoulder tapper. This is what comes in. And what that is that we send a direct message on Slack to the product owner, letting them know the work was ready for review. Now, this is very important when we're not all in the same room, or even when you're working asynchronously, maybe around the globe. It's good to know when something is ready. And one of the anti-patterns I was seeing was that team members waiting until the daily scrum to alert the product owner that they had work that was ready for review. And that was a lot of waste. Now, once the product owner approved it with the checkbox, because that's how we did things, the system, that gondolier, would move the ticket automatically through. So through this thing, through the gondoliers and shoulder tappers, we are continually moving our work through, not letting it build up waste. So let's do a quick recap of what we're talking about. We've improved some transparency of the sprint backlog. We helped them stop working on blocked tickets, hired some gondoliers to move the flow through, and engaged in some shoulder tapping. So the question is, did it work? What I have here is a cycle time chart from the year 2020. And you can see at this time, we were averaging over 20 days from when work started to when it was released. Now, through a series of automations and coaching, by 2022, we had cut it down to about 12 days, a 40% decrease in cycle time. So you can say, yes, it did work. But with continual improvement, there's always room to improve further. So the question is, was there more we could do? During some one-on-ones, I heard some grumblings about the speed at which work was being delivered to production. It was actually, people were saying it's going too fast. Things are getting out there before proper amount of review. And so what I did, I went back to the team. And with this one, another retrospective, this is the classic start, stop, continue. Now, sometimes this one gets a bit old, but it's a classic and it feels nice to go back to. It's so simple, so elegant, and it gets to the point. And it was clear once again that there was a problem. And this was that feedback on UI changes was coming too late, or we were releasing things to production without a design review. So there was a clear action item that seemed so simple to the team. The team said, hey, we have these stages in our development process. Let's just add another stage for designers. Like say, hey, they need to review it at this fourth step. Now, sitting in the room, I quickly switched from facilitating to advising. And I asked them, like, what might happen if we add another gate to our development process? The room quieted. And, I kind of want to instantly kick into a teaching moment, but there's something for the team needs to grow on. I held my mouth shut and I looked down at my desk. And I saw this sticky note I've had here for years, which is embrace the silence. It was hard, but it was worth it. The team needed to learn. They needed to figure this one out. Obviously, they knew that I saw there might be a challenge with this. They needed to figure this out. And after what seemed like an eternity, the team was still stumped. And, they asked me what to do, which is perfectly fine. That's why we as coaches, scrum masters, teach. So I proposed an idea. I said, what if we don't change our workflow? What if instead we just ask a question, a simple question in a transition screen that asks the developer a question, were there any UI changes? That's it. If the answer is yes, the designer would get a Slack notification. If the answer was no, nothing would change. And both of these outcomes do not interrupt the flow of our work. And this is how it looks when a ticket moves to code review. A modal is popped up. So we say, hey, well, in an automation, when it moves from in progress to code review, we ask a question. It's modal screen, which says, hey, were there UI changes? Or were there no UI changes? They have to pick one of these. There's some regex check that makes sure that they pick one. And if it's yes, then we send an alert to the designer saying, hey, this person has indicated there are some UI changes. Please review them and provide any necessary feedback and a link to the ticket. So this week, like I said, we wouldn't interrupt the flow of value, but we'd let people know what they needed to know. So I got a question for y'all. How many items are currently in your team's product backlog? Type it in the chat or yell out loud in the room.
Hundreds.
Hundreds, yes. Backlog management is such a big thing that Scrum.org recently came out with a certification for backlog management. But what I want to do with this question is I'm going to teach y'all using automation instead of just a screen, instead of just a presentation, how we might automate the cleanup of our backlog. Let me first talk through it. Now, the key, this is one of the ones I've been running for years, and it keeps backlogs short. We're talking about the tens, maybe 40 items in the backlog versus the hundreds like I had. And the key to the backlog was it needs to be the key to cleaning up the backlog is it needs to be scheduled. So, it's able to run Jira automations, can do cron jobs. So say, hey, for every 1 week on a Monday at 7 a.m., run this job. I picked 7 a.m. local time because that was before most people started work. So they weren't inundated with notifications around tickets closing, because once people see tickets closing, they get scared. Now, prior to kicking this one in, unlike the avalanche of notifications, I decided to partner with some people I'd learned, I had grown, and I negotiated with the product managers. I'm like, what's the right amount of time that it's okay for something to be closed out? They would say like, oh, a year. And I'm like, that's way too long. Because of, one thing is if an idea is good enough, it's going to come back again. So we negotiated, said, hey, it was created over 3 months ago and they haven't touched it in a month. It's probably an old stale story and we should just close it out. So this is some JQL, which I'll show you, which is like, hey, we look, say, is this a story? Then we ask, is the sprint empty? Or is it not in the current sprint or future sprints? We look at these conditions, say like, okay, is it essentially is asking, is it planned? And then we ask the question like, hey, was it created over 90 days ago and updated? It hasn't been updated in over 30 days. And if so, then we're going to close it out. But we're going to be transparent about it. And we do that by making a message, either in email and or in the ticket. In the ticket, this is what we write, which is, this story has been closed by Jira automation, so by the robot, due to the following conditions. It was created over 90 days ago. It's not in the current sprint nor scheduled for a future sprint. And you haven't updated it in 30 days. Now, if you feel like it was closed in error, please reopen and prioritize correctly. Now, those are just words on screen. I'm going to show you how we do this. Let me switch my screen share. Where? Let me stop and. Oh, there we go. Just hiding behind another window. Share screen. All right, so this is built into Jira, but also Jira does have a automation playground on their website. Hopefully, you all can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to, we have to have a trigger. Like I said, we're going to do schedule. So this just filters down. We're going to say this is scheduled. We're going to run it every 1 week. Like I said, on Monday at 7 a.m. Local time. I am on the West Coast of the US, so I'm in Los Angeles time zone. And what we want to do is we want to run it against that JQL I talked about. So we're going to insert a search here. And I'm going to copy over my query search. Now, when you're doing this, one thing I like to do is I like to hit validate query. This validates that, that is actually is good JQL. And if it was to find anything, it would say how many issues. And if you click it again, it'll pop open a window. You can see what matches that JQL. Now we're in the playground, so nothing matches it, which is okay. The other thing we want to do when you write one of these cron job-based automations, there's a checkbox here that says only include issues that have changed since the last time this rule executed. We want to uncheck that box. And the reason is is it's not going to be going through millions and millions of records. It's just going to be going through, maybe at most 100. So let it just chomp through all of them. Chomp. All right, then we'll hit save. So now we have our condition, our trigger. Now we want to take an action. So what we're gonna do is we have that one that said, hey, if it's over 90 days old, you update in 30 days. Let's close it. So now we want to transition the issue. And up here we say how we want to transition it. We're just saying, hey, we're gonna go and close it. Now, whatever word you guys use for close, you can do that. Or say close it. And then we want to add that note into the system. And so we will do another action, and we're going to comment on the issue. That's where I'll put in my comment. A cool thing here, you saw in some of those other automations I posted, there were some curly brackets that were variables. So there's this concept called smart values in Jira automation, where you can actually pull out some distinct information. And that is another mine that is very deep, which is the smart values. We're not going to do that here. So here we have that comment here. We'll hit save. So this says, if we transition something to close, go ahead and add this comment. Lastly, we need to give this thing a name. We'll call it backlog closer. Now, what I did is I had different rules. I have different rules set up for tasks, stories, design tickets, and epics and bugs. So each of those will have a different rule set because they have different JQL to look at, and that's based on negotiating with the product owner. And so those might say backlog closer stories, backlog closer bugs. And one of the cool things I found with bugs, closing them automatically. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Park said. Just about done with this. Is that when people put a bug in the backlog and it stays open, there's a hope in the person who filed it that it's going to get fixed. This is false sense of hope. We're better to tell them, hey, no, we're not going to do this. So that's where you do it. So turn it on. So, and that's all you need to do. It's a very simple system to use. You don't need to know, like I showed you a lot of these if-else statements, and it's about exploring. So let me switch back to my presentation. Stop. For some reason, it doesn't like switching. Normally use Google Meet at work. All right. So before we get into QA, I wanted to so that's mostly the end of one wrap up. But I want to ask you, like, how many people feel like they gained something valuable today? You raise your hand, or excellent. So I'm wondering if you could do something for me. I'm very interested in feedback. The survey takes less than 2 minutes, so I'd love it if y'all in the room would take out your phone and scan this QR code. If you're at home, you can type in this address, and this is how I'm going to be able to give you a copy of the presentation. Because this is something I love giving talks at conferences, and I want to improve on it. And so your feedback is going to help me improve my skills as a speaker. And you can make that happen. So if you wouldn't mind, just like if you do the survey, just write done in the chat as soon as you're done. Or if you're in the room, just put your phone down and kind of look up at the screen. I'm gonna try to make this bigger. There we go.
Fred,
Yes.
just curious if there is anything else that you want to share with us, or should we take some time for Q&A?
Yeah. So no, just the I would like last as a call to action for y'all.
Sure.
Observe bottlenecks in your process. You can ask the team what they could have known earlier. Try your hand at some automation. Let's connect on LinkedIn, and you can ask me questions. There's a huge community out there, and whatever you do, I remind you as a Scrum Master, Agile coach, measure, measure, measure. Cycle times, throughput, team happiness. Measure the impact you have on the business, because those are great conversations you can have with your boss, your sponsor. And that's it. So yeah, now we got 8 minutes left for some Q&A. So I'll stop my screen share, and feel free, if you're online, you can write messages, or you can or you can unmute and talk, or someone in the room can ask things.
Thank you. Somebody here in the room, maybe?
Yeah, can I just talk?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. I was wondering, I saw that you had set up your Jira that you can move issues in more than just 2 states. As for example, we just have in progress or done. And so how do you what benefit do you see, or how does it affect the work of a team when you can put it into, I don't know, state code review or quality assurance and so on?
Yeah, I see that. I do like the idea of simplistic Kanban. It's either done or it's not done. But what we found was, working in a distributed team, like even before the global pandemic, the team I worked with is over in Bangladesh, and we're in the US, even around the US. And so the power we found was, whether it was at the daily scrum or a team member pulling up the sprint board, they could instantly understand the status of things. They didn't have to dive into a ticket to see what's going on. People could understand, okay, I missed a code review email. I need to go do a code review, or something in demo. Now, there's an anti-pattern with this, which I was starting to unravel, which is people felt like they worked in columns. QA was on the team, but they're like, oh, I work in this column. And so when I started coaching them to shift quality to the left, they really struggled with that concept because they worked at the QA column. So you can do it. Just watch out for anti-patterns. We found value in it, because it also helped us evaluate the flow of the work, and if we needed to intervene or coach around certain stages in our process.
All right.
We have also a couple of questions in the chat. One of them is, how do you measure happiness, really?
Dieter said happiness will trend. A couple of ways. My favorite way to do it is quarterly. I would do the Spotify survey, which has a happiness metric in there, and just ask people to rate things like how happy are they on the team, like a red, yellow, green stoplight kind of way. Other ways is that you can oh, the word's leaving me, but there is a method you can do. You get a calendar out, and after every day or every event, you ask people to rate how they feel about it. Happy, sad, angry, whatever it might be, or neutral. And then you can get like a heat map, which shows how those things are. And you can say, maybe people are very stressed the day before release or the day before the sprint starts. A lot of it's a softer thing. But surveys, end of retros is a great time to do it. Yeah, that's how I might say how we measure happiness. Self-reported.
What would you say, like, how often would you measure the happiness? Like, because sometimes I heard opinions where they're like, okay, we're measuring it just, let's say, after a staff meeting or something, like every quarter once. Other people said, like, yeah, maybe we should, I don't know, do it like on more regular basis, like on a weekly basis, because then you have a little bit more not to a certain event connected happiness chart, or like you said, maybe if it's like more of a project like next to the releases. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Those are all good. The key to any of those is consistency. Now, a tool that I'd used at a previous organization was called Lattice, and every week we would file a report back to like our boss about like how are we planning, you know, what do we work on this week, what are we planning for the next week, any additional information. And there was like just a happiness scale at the bottom. I had 3 Scrum Masters work for me, and I love when they would, you know, put that information in there so then I could aggregate that over time. If someone was always happy and all of a sudden they had a bad week, during my next one-on-one, say, hey, let's talk about this. You're not feeling so good. That helps create that psychological safety. But going back to what you had mentioned, consistency is key. Whatever cadence you decide to do it, maybe end of a retro, just do it like that. Whenever you do things like this, do it for at least 3 sprints, because then you can make it part of your natural process, and you can start to actually build up a baseline and look for trends. So if you're going to do something, try and experiment at least for 3 sprints.
We have another question here on the chat. Have you tried to make automations, to take automations to the team? For example, teaching them to do automations in Jira?
Yes. And well, first I was the person who was only doing it. And so first I started teaching out to the other Scrum Masters how they could do it. It was a little bit of a struggle because I just wanted to do it because I could do it really quick. But, you know, if I wanted a long-term success, I needed to teach people. So they were learning it. And then there was one team that spun up. It was a security team, just 2 people. And I actually coached them on how to do automations because they needed it for some approval process as part of their security scans. So, you know, the person I talked to, it was very easy for them to use it. It's intuitive. It's almost like blocks or if else kind of stuff. And once again, I was always available if they had any questions.
Perfect. Great. I think we are.
Just one.
Sure.
One second. Do you know, is the automation only available in Jira in the cloud version or also on the on-premise versions? Because I haven't noticed the automation button on our on-premise version yet.
That's a great question. I don't know. One thing I will say about Jira Cloud is depending on your subscription level, there's different numbers of global automations you get. And so one workaround that I would do, because we work on Jira Enterprise, is copy the automation for each team project. So it didn't trigger against my global quota. I still did have global things I needed to run, but certain things like adding to the sprint was a team-based thing.
All right. Thank you.
I'll leave you with one. Thank you, Dieter. If you've ever run into an issue where someone adds a ticket to the wrong sprint, especially if you're in cloud, sometimes like the sprint button goes to the wrong team. You can actually make an automation to catch that. If you use a common naming convention for your sprints, like we have teams like platform enablement, their initials are PEN, P-E-N. And so we say, hey, if the sprint does not start with PEN, don't add it, like remove it from the sprint, because we're preventing tickets from getting cross-contaminated across projects, because sometimes Jira Cloud, when they make updates, it causes some problems. So I want to thank you all for being with me this afternoon, the last one before, I guess, the mingle, and for hosting me. It was wonderful to be part of this conference, and thank you for the great participation and people in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. Fred Deichler. Y'all are probably one of the only countries that can easily spell it without me explaining it.
Perfect.